are you on now?
Yeah.
Jerry's on. Peter, are you on?
We're here.
Yep.
All right, I think we're good.
So do we think we have everybody on now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So Brittany has sent out an exit packet for all of you, and prior to developing a PowerPoint, it used to be we just went through the exit packet. So we still provide that. That's going to have additional details, so we may reference that and say, we have the full report in the exit packet or the hotline letter. But the PowerPoint will kind of just go over things in a more high-level format. It's something we developed during the pandemic as we're doing most of our things remotely. We're starting to get back on site a little bit more now, but most of our exits have happened remotely, and we've actually been doing work for other teams across the state where we, we're really 5 hours away, and so we're doing everything remotely. So we found this format kind of helps to keep everyone on the same page. So the first slide here, just to do some introductions from our side. So I'm Brad White. I'm the audit manager for Team Spokane, who's the team responsible for the City of Harrington exit. It also says I'm a program manager. So what that means is I'm the program manager for counties in the state of Washington for the state auditor's office. So I help develop the planning guide for our audit staff that talks about what is a county, goes through all of the departments, talks about risks and that sort of thing. If there's issues that could be potentially a management letter or finding, I work with all the teams statewide to help determine what the reporting level would be, and then to do the review on that. I attend a lot of county conferences. When we have things like legislative issues that affect counties that come up, I'm part of those conversations at the state auditor's office. I also have with me today Weston Fink, he was the audit supervisor for this audit, and he's one of my assistant audit managers. And then Brittany Benning was the audit lead, so she's the person that you would have worked with the most. She's the one that does the heavy lifting. She planned the audit, performed the audit, concluded the audit. So she's the one with the most direct interaction. And then maybe either Jess or Jerry, if one of you could either do introductions for the city, or you're all welcome to introduce yourself as well if that works better for you.
Well, this is Jess. I'm the mayor. I am present here. Jerry Lee is the clerk. He's on. We have council position. Joe, are you listening in via your computer? I would say our council.
You're being picked up from yours and that.
Okay, I'm gonna
This is.
Did Joe come on there?
Are you done, Jess?
And then come closer to this mic.
Okay, is Joe Armand on?
Mute your computer.
This is Peter Davenport, council member. Been on the council since January of 2009.
Jerry, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm wondering if we lost the mayor. All of a sudden, his box went away on
I'm
Teams.
actually here listening in via the other computer.
Go ahead and sit in Peter's position, and I'll get this right for you.
Jess is gone, and then Jerry, you're muted, and then the Harrington conference participant is muted as well. So, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. Oh, Jess is back. Welcome back.
This is live, Stephen.
Go ahead and try that.
Okay, we're all around one big table here now.
Okay.
David Budrus is here.
Council member 2.
Council position 2. And I have not seen Joe Armand yet. He was going to try to get on from his work site. So I'm going to assume that council position 1 is not on board yet.
You can put that between you and Peter,
Sure.
and then you can look at that, David.
Thanks. Thank you.
So I believe everybody has made introductions now?
Okay, so if we can go on to slide number 2.
Okay.
So our second slide here, we have Pat McCarthy, who's our elected state auditor. Some people are familiar with her, some maybe wouldn't be, so this kind of puts a face with a name. And it talks about 3 of her core principles. So one of the things she's hoping to do is create increased trust in government. Especially over the last several years, there may be citizens that have lost some of that trust in federal government or state government. And so she's trying to kind of get the message out that when it comes to local government, we really see a lot more good than bad. And that, occasionally we unfortunately do run into frauds and that sort of thing. But for the most part, we really feel like people in local government are trying to be good stewards of the public's money, trying to ensure that tax dollars are spent appropriately, that sort of thing. So the way that she hopes to do that is through independent, transparent examinations. So that's one of the things that we do out of Spokane as we're doing these audits of our local government clients, so the citizens can be assured that someone is looking at the records and we're independent. We're not on the side of we don't work for the governments. We're an independent auditing body, and so we're able to do that work. And then third, she's hoping to create improved efficiency and effectiveness of government. Some of that is through audits. We make recommendations and try to help out, but we also have other parts of our agency where they're not actually going out and auditing the clients. We have the Government for Innovation, Center for Government Innovation that we'll talk about a little bit later, performance audit, different parts of our agency where they're paid through tax dollars and they're really just going out to try to help governments improve their processes, maybe especially an organization like yours when you have a smaller government where there's not as many employees and people potentially wearing multiple hats, seeing what we can do to kind of help that process. So I'm going to now turn it over to Weston to go through some reports with you.
Yeah. So thanks, Brad. So I'm on slide number 3. This slide specifically is in regards to the summary schedule of prior audit findings. So this is some follow-up we did on the finding we issued in the prior audit period. So in that last period, over periods 2015, 16, 17, and 18, the annual reports were submitted after the filing deadline. And so because of that prior audit, we issued a finding. So this year to follow up on, we basically just checked to see if the annual reports for 2019 and 2020 were submitted on time. 2019 was, and 2020 was 54 days late. So because of that, the status is partially corrected. So there were definitely steps taken to improve that, which we can see. And also the city provided a response stating that they installed a computer-based accounting system, Springbrook, which used to be known as Bias, which has provided the city with more accurate and timely reports that can be easily produced. So we just recommend that the city continue to improve that submission process. And Brittany will go over an exit item in regards to that a bit later. On the next slide, here's kind of the overall accountability audit results. So for this year, again, we looked at 2019 through 2020. There's a number of issues which we'll go through this exit conference, but the city still received an unmodified audit opinion. So in those selected areas, the city operations complied in all material respects with applicable state laws, regulations, and its own policies, and provided adequate controls to safeguard resources. So a bit as a recap, there's 3 different levels of reporting that we can issue. There's findings, there's management letters, and exit items. Findings are our most severe recommendation we provide. There's significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. We didn't have any findings issued this time. For management letters, they're kind of in the middle. They're issues that need to be addressed that could be elevated to findings if not resolved, but they kind of fall in the middle. We had 2 management letters issued this audit period, which we'll go over on the next slide. And then exit items are the smaller kind of housekeeping items typically controls that could be improved or policies that should be put in place. There's things that, if left unresolved, could lead to holes in city operations that could lead to bigger issues. So we had 8 exit items that were issued during the audit period, 5 of which were reissued to some extent from the prior audit itself. And we also had 1 hotline letter that we'll go over as well that kind of incorporates the sections that we looked into. And just as a reminder, we don't look at everything, thankfully. You would never be rid of us if we looked at every single transaction. We do risk-based approach, so that is just your friendly reminder that we don't look at every transaction. So, excuse me, I said the next letter was the hotline, or the management letter, but that's the one after this. So this slide in itself is the actual sections that we looked into. So there were 5 sections. The first one was the general ledger software conversion. During the audit period, you switched from a manual system to Springbrook. We had a management letter that I'll talk about in the next slide in regards to this. And we reviewed it because of that conversion to see if there were procedures in place to ensure that information was accurately moved over. We also looked at financial condition. This is a required risk to assess for all cities and towns across the state. Due to COVID, just a lot of uncertainties with the sustainability of operations of certain governments. So we just look at it across the board. Thankfully, we had no exit items in this section. Or no issues, I should say. For open public meetings, another one, this is another required risk we looked at across the state to ensure that meetings are in compliance with open public meetings requirements. We had 1 exit item in regards to that, which we'll talk about later. For payroll, we looked at gross wages and leave cash outs. There was a management letter issued over this section. It was reviewed in part because of the hotline submitted to us, and we incorporated our conclusions from this section into those results. Then we reviewed controls put in place by the city, reviewed payroll disbursements and leave tracking for 8 employees over 29 different pay periods. And then for accounts receivable and utility billing, we had an exit item we issued in this one as well. It was also reviewed partially because of the hotline submitted, and we incorporated those conclusions from this section in there as well. For this, we also reviewed controls over utility billing rates and the accuracy of those charges based upon approved rates for 22 different citizens. So now on this slide, I'll talk about the management letters themselves. Get up. So there's not really a quick way to go through all this, but I'll try and talk about it as best as I can. So for the payroll management letter, our audit found internal control concerns over payroll disbursements, the tracking and monitoring of leave balance accruals and limits, and retention of previous balance records. Specifically, the city has a policy requiring employees to be paid raises based on a step increase plan. However, the city doesn't have that specific plan. So you have a policy that says employees are to be paid step increases, but then there's not an actual step increase plan approved by the city. City supervisors are not consistently signing time cards to indicate that they performed a secondary review of employees' time worked, and the city's not verifying that payroll amounts are accurately calculated based upon approved pay rates by not signing that. Additionally, the city is not ensuring that leave balances are tracked, accruals are accurate, leave balance limits are not exceeded, or the documentation is retained for previous leave activity for all employees. And then we reviewed pay disbursements for 8 employees during fiscal year 2020, and from that, we found the following results. So of those 8 employees we looked at, we found 2 that were underpaid by $3,800 based upon what their approved pay rates were saying. We found 5 employees that were underpaid a total of $434. And then again with those time cards, we found employees and management did not consistently sign off on those time cards to ensure that they were reviewed. And then on the leave accrual and payout side for those 8 employees we looked at for fiscal year 2020, we found a number of variances. So first, there were 47 hours of sick leave accruals above what city policy allows, 66 hours of sick leave accruals below what city policy requires, 256 hours of vacation leave accruals above city policy, 27 hours of vacation leave below city policy. There was 1 former employee who was paid out 72 hours of sick time, which was based on an estimate and not actual documentation, because there was not that documentation retained to see what his balance was exactly as of that date that he left. And the city cannot determine the amount of unused vacation time for the beginning of 2020 for one employee due to records not being available.
No, this is all stuff from 2 or 3 years ago.
Did you have a question, or do you want me to keep going?
No, you're fine. Keep going.
Alright. So, recommendations to go along with that. We recommend the city council work with management to ensure, to establish effective internal controls over processing payroll and monitoring leave balances. 1, establish a step increase plan to ensure pay raises are in accordance with what you expect. Ensure employees accrue leave in accordance with city policy. Ensure leave is deducted in accordance with policy. Ensure disbursements are based upon approved rates. Ensure overtime disbursements are made in accordance with city policy. Make sure to keep all supporting documentation for pay and leave accruals. And since there were overpayments, consider a legal review to determine if you want to recoup overpayments to employees. And then the next management letter, which was the software conversion. So as I said before, that there was a conversion from the manual system to the electronic general ledger system. And during that, there was not sufficient controls in place to ensure that all the data from the manual general ledger was accurately converted to the new one. So there wasn't a reconciliation performed to ensure all of the information was accurately entered, and we identified a $948,000 variance from what the ending balances were in the manual general ledger system to the new electronic system. So that can lead to a number of variances in the financial statements and various schedules that you generate based upon that new electronic system. So in order to fix that, we recommend the city implement a plan to correct the fund balance variances in the new system and implement controls necessary to ensure
You can't have this
accurate
in. That's where
fiscal
the
activities for work.
audio has to come from there.
Sorry.
So those are the 2 management letters. So with that, I'll hand it off to Brittany to talk about the hotline letter.
I thought we were going to speak on the hotline after the exit items. If we could do that.
Go back after that.
Yeah, that'd be great. As Weston mentioned, we did have a number of exit recommendations during the audit, and these exit recommendations can lead to management letters if not corrected, but at this point, they're housekeeping items, policies we recommend you creating, and things of that nature. They are not referenced in the audit report, but a handout of these exit items has been provided to Jerry and Jess. Next slide. Our first exit item was regarding the purchasing policy, and this exit item was a reissued exit item from the prior audit, so it's just something we recommended prior and was not corrected by the time of this audit. So we determined the city doesn't have a formal purchasing policy or process to monitor vehicle usage. And due to this, we recommend the city should adopt a formal written purchasing policy, and the city should establish a process to monitor motor vehicle usage, specifically your maintenance vehicles that are used by city staff. The next exit item is regarding the cash receipting policy, and this is also a reissued exit item from the prior audit. It's that the city doesn't have a cash receipting policy that states the procedures for handling the city's money, and we recommend the city create and maintain a policy to ensure any new and current employees are aware of cash handling procedures. And then we also suggest that the policy includes secondary review and separation of duties. Next slide. The next exit item is on Open Public Meetings Act, and during our audit, we review all meeting minutes and all agendas to view what the city has done during the audit period. And in this review, we noted that the city council voted on an item that was listed as discussion only on the agenda, and the city was unable to provide 2 council meeting agendas and 3 council meeting minutes. And we recommend that the city create controls that ensure the city is in compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act, RCWs. Next, that's on that side. Our next exit item is on credit cards, and during our review, we noted the city doesn't have a credit card use policy, which is required by state law, and we recommend that the city council create and implement a credit card policy, since the city does now have a U.S. Bank Visa credit card. Next slide. The next exit item is on accounts payable. The city doesn't have a policy in place to ensure the timely payment of invoices or controls in place to ensure that late fees are paid when incurred. Specifically, we noted that the city paid invoices that were due in May of 2020 and July of 2020. And we recommend that the city implement policies that ensure the approval and payment of invoices by the due date, and that late fees are negotiated or paid. The next exit item has quite a few points. It's regarding the utility billing, and this is based on the testing we performed that Weston mentioned of specific utility billing accounts. We noted that the city did not formally approve a resolution prior to increasing the utility rates in fiscal year 2020. To clarify, the city did create a resolution, it just wasn't approved and signed during a board meeting. The city also did not give citizens 45 days prior notice per state law of the intent to increase the solid waste rates. There were minor billing variances that totaled about $78, and dumpster rates and rates for water use beyond 5,000 gallons weren't included in the resolution. We also found that previous balances were input into the accounting software inaccurately, causing about a $583 net variance across citizens' accounts tested. And the city doesn't have a policy in place to enforce collections, shut off utilities, or file liens. And the last issue we found with utility billing was that the city doesn't have a secondary review of utility billings or changes of utility rates and accounting software. So we had a few recommendations on the city's utility billing, and they were to create and implement policies that ensure that the resolution is voted on and passed in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act for all utility rate increases, that citizens are informed of proposed solid waste rate increases, and the resolution includes all types of billings. We also recommend implementing a process to enforce collections, shutoffs, and liens, and that the city has a secondary review of utility billings, and this can be a mayor review or council review after the billings are completed. Next exit item. We did reissue an exit item for annual report filing. It was not a binding level issue during this audit, but since there was 1 year where the annual report wasn't filed until 54 days after the deadline in 2020, we did create an exit item, and we just recommend that the city create and implement controls over financial reporting to ensure compliance with that deadline. And the last exit item is in regards to financial statement preparation. Though we didn't perform a full financial statement audit, we do still look at small parts of the financial statements to make sure that big statements and reconciliations tie. And during our review, we noted we were unable to reconcile the bank statements with the submitted annual report. And for 2019, we identified $52,466 in variances. In 2020, $32,288 in variances between the annual report and the bank statements. And we recommend that the city improve controls over financial reporting to ensure the financial statements are accurate and presented based on supporting documentation. And then we can circle back around to the hotline. Sorry about that. So before the beginning of the audit, a citizen did express concerns to the state auditor's office, which we looked into during sections we reviewed during the audit. And the first concern was that there was concerns regarding compliance with open public meetings. And what we concluded on is we determined that the city did not vote or approve resolutions for utility rate increases and did not retain all agendas and meeting minutes. And we made the recommendations we went over for these issues. In the second issue for the citizen hotline, the citizen was concerned about conflicts of interest regarding the posting of job openings, disbursement of COVID-19 funds, and work done for other entities by the city mayor. And we found during our audit that there were no conflict of interest issues. The citizen was also concerned about cash receiving procedures, potentially causing late fees to be incurred even when payments were made on time. I'm sorry, this was the third issue. And during our audit, we determined that current city staff receipts all payments on the day they were received, and that during the period noted, no late fees were incurred due to the governor proclamation. The staff that were in place when the issue occurred were no longer at the city and not available to speak to, but we went based on what is done now. The next concern is that the city was disbursements to the city's attorney for advice and assistance for writing the chicken ordinance were potentially not allowed. And we determined during our audit that all expenditures, including those to the city's attorney, are approved by the city council, and the city does not have a policy that prohibits attorney expenditures. In this same issue, the citizen was concerned about non-response to a public records request, but we found that that was outside of the purview of SAO to investigate. The next concern was that the citizen was concerned that a city employee applied for, received, and used an Amazon credit card without the city council approval. And we found during our audit that the employee set up an Amazon account, but not a credit card, and the council does not need to approve the creation of an account. The citizen in the same concern was concerned that the city did not have a resolution or ordinance governing how staff would use the credit card. And we did find that the city did not have a policy set up for this, which we made a recommendation on. Next, the citizen was concerned about an off-record $1,500 check that the city issued to a former employee in June of 2020 for sick leave buyout. And the citizen also said that the former employee was denied a payout for 3 weeks of accrued vacation leave upon separation from the city, contrary to city policy. And the last part of this concern was that the city kept someone on payroll in April 2021 as a full-time employee, even though this person had resigned from the city for a different position at Lincoln County. And during our audit, we found that the vacation leave payout is only made upon approval of the mayor, and the mayor at the time decided to not pay out this leave. We did not find any indication that the mayor's decision was disciplinary. We found the city did issue a check for sick leave payout, but it was a best estimate of how many hours were in the bank as the city did not have records. The sick payout was allowable, but we made recommendations that we went over for the city to keep documentation to support all employee pay. And this was in the management letter Weston went over. We also spoke with city staff and determined the employee worked at the city and Lincoln County at the same time. The last concern on the citizen hotline was that the citizen was concerned that several customers were dropped when a former employee transferred the accounts to the city's new accounting software in January 2020. This led to concerns that the customers were not being billed. In the same concern, the citizen had concerns that the method of water readings was causing a wage increase for those reading the water meters. And during our audit, we performed an analytical procedure to confirm the city transferred all utility customers from the old paper ledger system to the new accounting software. And we also spoke with city officials who are unaware of how meters were read historically, but reported meter reading is now part of the full-time maintenance position. And that was it for the citizen hotline.
Okay, so on this next slide, we're going through some closing remarks. So the actual audit cost will approximate $18,500 plus travel costs. You'll see in your exit packet we have the full breakdown of those costs. And then the next audit is going to be in 2023. So it's going to be an accountability audit, just like this audit would be. And we also provided an estimated cost for the next audit in that exit packet. So next slide. So for the report publication, so what will happen is after today's meeting, we'll document who is in attendance and sort of what we went over today. And then I'll hit publish on the report, let Olympia know that this is ready to be published. And it should be on our website by next Thursday. And then that essentially makes it an open public record at that point. So anyone really anywhere can look at it, but typically it's just people in our state that would look at that. So then citizens could go look at the report. They also have the ability to look at past reports if they wanted to do that. The other thing that will happen once the report is published is selected members of management will receive an audit survey from us. So that information goes to me, and it kind of helps me see how my team's doing. So if there's things that we did well that you appreciated, let us know that. If there's things we can improve on or suggestions, ideas, anything like that, just fill out the survey and give us that information. That's really a tool that we use to try to improve our services or know what's going well in terms of the audits that we go out and perform. So next slide. So another slide on working together to improve government. So I referenced this at the very beginning. Some of the other parts of our office that are not there to audit you, but really they're more just to kind of assist you. So the first one is the local government support team. So they're the ones that you work with when you're doing your annual report filing. They're also the ones that create the BARS manual, make changes to that, the BARS coding, all of that kind of information. They also provide various trainings. If you do a help desk, they are typically the ones that are answering that. Second is the Center for Government Innovation. So as I mentioned before, this is paid through tax dollars. So if you were to access them, there's no additional cost. Same with the local government support team. There's no cost working with them. But with the center, they're hoping to do some process improvement facilitation. They also provide a lot of free resources and tools for best practices on our website. So a lot of people will access different checklists and that sort of thing. And then they are the ones that work on the financial intelligence tool or FIT tool that looks at where you're at in terms of different ratios and seeing if you're in a good financial situation. So if you're interested, you can always use that email to set up an appointment with them. So probably a best example of something that I know they did is there was a city that the permit process for citizens was taken about 34 days. And so the center came in and looked at the process and was able to remove a lot of additional or extra processes that were unnecessary and kind of lean the process. And by the end of it, it went from 34 days down to 4 days. And so it was really something that worked out well. Sometimes, you may not know exactly if there's an area you specifically wanted help with, but that's where if you just set up a meeting with them, they can kind of talk to you a little bit more about what they do and how they can help. Next slide. So lastly, we just wanted to give a thank you. We wanted to thank city officials and staff for detailed communications throughout the audit process. Doing things remotely is definitely a little bit more difficult. Brittany was able to go on site some to try to work through some of this, but we know there's a lot of information that you need to provide. You've also had turnover at different positions, which obviously adds to some complication, and we're doing a multi-year audit, and so we're asking you to go back several years, which can also be a little bit difficult. So we just appreciate having that relationship with us, but we're trying to complete everything and work together to get to the end of the audit and have the results that we're providing today.
Sure.
And then last slide. So now we're at the point for any questions you might have. You also have my contact information there. You can always contact me, and then you have Brittany and Weston's contact information in the exit packet, so you can always reach out to them. So any questions from anyone?
I have a quick, several, but I'll start out with, and maybe this is for Brittany, but anyhow, it's financial statement preparation. I was just curious, when it's reported that there was a variance of $52,466 in 19 and $32,288 in 2020, what was the bank statements reporting more than what we were reporting, or were let me start over. Were the bank statements showing a higher balance than what we were reporting, or was the city reporting a higher balance than what the bank statements showed? Which, do you guys know the answer to that?
I don't know offhand, but I can find that information and get it to you.
I can look real quick. I don't.
Oh, okay.
It's just in our profile somewhere. Oh, it's in the spreadsheet. Okay, just a second. Excel takes its time opening. All right, so yeah, for 2019, the county treasurer report had more money on it than the financial statements. So the financial statements were underreported. For 2020, it was the same. There was more on the treasurer's report than on the financial statements.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I'll start in on the next question, and probably my last, well, one of the last questions. Don't want to bore you guys. I appreciate you guys taking time out for this. In regards to the hot points or the concerned citizen, in particular, it's number 6, and it's been kind of a local, well, hot topic. And my question to you folks, this may or may not be the question appropriate for you folks, but looking at the current policy in place at that time, nowhere do I find in there that the mayor had the authority to withhold unused vacation pay upon termination retirement. And that being said, earlier, there's two events happened in December of 19. There was withholding of vacation time for a current employee, and that was totally justifiable under Chapter 11. And then that same month, that person retired and terminated her employment with the city, and never was compensated as per the current policy handbook stated. And the one I'm referring to, it's under Chapter 5, 5.7, subset 3. And it says, upon termination, employee will be paid a lump sum of all accrued unused vacation and compensatory time. And therefore, to be consistent with other employees which retired about within a year and a half later, under the same policy, both of them were paid sick leave and vacation time. So in the spirit of the city being consistent with its employees, I'm searching for some answers, and I appreciate your answers on this.
Yeah, Brittany, do you want to speak to this, or would you rather I talk about it?
Yeah, I can speak to it. I know that when we started the audit, the city was in the process of creating a new policy. When I performed the audit, it was based on an older policy. I believe it was dated in the 90s that had been reviewed by McMullen Law Office. And that policy only had notes on leave payout in Chapter 10 and Chapter 11 that noted leave payout on the decision of the mayor. Let me open the audit. And
Well, maybe I can be a little clearer on this. Nowhere in there did I see that upon the stuff I'm reading, and it should be the same policy. It's an older one, former one, that was in place, in force at the time. And I never saw where upon terminate, or, retirement, termination, separation, they all kind of go together, that the mayor had that discretion. However, you are correct under Chapter 11 when it says the mayor, in the end of December of that year, any unused vacation, the mayor may pay that out at his.
Correct.
So that is true. That is true. Not arguing, and that was withheld in this case for all the employees actually. But that employee, after 40 some plus years, decided to retire and transition to retirement. Was denied her unused when she retired. And I'm not finding it. What I did quote you, it said that they'll be paid in Chapter 5.7 and subset 3. Now, whether you were furnished that information during the audit, I don't know. But I just looking for guidance now, and I want to be, as a council member, I think it's a fiduciary responsibility for employees to be fair and to be consistent moving forward, and to clear up any injustices of the past.
I was not furnished information during the audit that stated that there was leave payout at retirement. Just the information about leave payout in the Chapter 10 leave section of the policy.
And it could also be the council's discretion if you do want to go back and make that payout. What we were provided said the mayor has that discretion. There's nothing preventing you from still giving it out subsequently. When we audit to what we have available and what's presented to us.
Okay.
But if you still wanted to go back and say, there was this amount that the mayor decided not to pay out at that given time, and then subsequently approve that with the board, that is your decision.
I guess
With that-
go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Well, just my question, is that a legal question from this point on, or is it just a council? And the other question I have with that is, we go do that, is there statutory interest on that if we pay out now?
Yeah, I would recommend that you would speak to legal counsel about that. So, and that's where it really is, it's a management decision, as Weston stated. And so what we looked at is essentially, if the policy says it's at the mayor's discretion and the mayor chose not to do that, then all we can do is say, then that is within the policy. And so unfortunately we can't get involved in whether that they should have done it or shouldn't have done it, or how long the person worked there. We just looked at, that was, we didn't have any indication that we saw that we could look at that showed there was something, the reason it was done had any sort of malice. It was just that it was in their discretion whether to do it, and they chose not to. But if the current mayor and city council has different thoughts on that, you could certainly speak to your attorney and say, we're wanting to go rectify this situation. If you think that it was done, you don't agree with that decision at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for answering that.
I do have one last point on that, as during the course of the audit, the city wasn't able to furnish the actual sick and leave balances at the end of 2019 or any records for leave accruals prior to that.
Okay.
So it would be necessary to find how much vacation leave the employee may have had at the end of 2019 when they retired.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you for your time.
This is Peter Davenport, council member. I'd like to ask a question about one of the exit recommendations. You point out that our annual report for the fiscal year 2020 was 54 days late. Did you interview any employees, either current or past, on that to establish what the cause of that was?
I spoke with the treasurer, and he noted that he had difficulties with the system and conversion, and with interferences with his job as a teacher, for getting that in by the deadline.
Okay.
Hey Brittany, this is David Budrius again, Council 2. I got a question you may be able to answer. It was referenced about 3 missing meeting minutes. Do you happen to know the dates that are missing?
I can look in the audit and find right now.
Okay.
I think I found it, Brittany. Well, I guess we don't. Yeah, I guess it just says the date. It says agenda missing. It's the one right after. I guess it's 3/11/2020, 4/2/2020, and here's the third one. No document that looks like
David.
December 2nd, 2019. Is that what you're seeing on your end too, Brittany, or am I misreading the minutes spreadsheet?
Did you understand what they had to say about your question?
Well, that was April what of 2020? Again, the middle one, the second one you said?
April 2nd, 2020?
Okay, thank you. All right.
Is that what you're seeing on your end as well? I see it's like right underneath that date, so I'm assuming that's what was missing, Brittany. Oh, you're on mute.
Love technology.
Brittany, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I see April 2nd, 2020 for missing agenda for the regular meeting, and missing minutes for a special meeting that was held prior to the regular meeting. And then March 11th for a missing agenda.
So when you're quoting agendas, but the minutes themselves are missing.
Correct.
Same date.
But when you do minutes review, specifically since there were concerns about items being reviewed in meetings that weren't on the agenda, I compared the minutes to the agenda to just ensure that everything was present, and those were meetings where the agenda was unable to be provided to us.
Okay, very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
I only have one question. In regards to the Open Public Meetings Act, are we to understand that it's never permissible to vote on anything that was not listed on the agenda?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
To expand upon that question, even if it's at the meeting, it's an addition to the agenda?
I think you can make those additions if you approve it and second it by a council member to put it on the agenda.
And if we do
And I
that,
believe you can vote on it.
then we could
That's just
vote
off
on
the
it?
top of my head, though.
Okay. That did come up.
Brad, does that sound right to you?
Well, I was going to say, I think you should probably look at the RCW and maybe get back to them on that. Make sure that, because I'm not sure if there needs to be like a 24 hours notice if there was a change to the agenda, so that people would be aware of it, because maybe it's something they're interested in and they would show up if they knew it was on there. But if there's like a last minute change, then but I think we'll go ahead and take a look at that and get back to you, make sure we're giving you the exact right information.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time?
None come to mind, I guess, so.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time today, and you can, if you think of other questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll get back to you on that last question you had. And so what will happen at this place, or at this time, as I mentioned, the report publication, but the other thing that I will be doing is sending out a copy of the letter to the citizen. That would be pretty much the same letter we provided to you, just, addressed a little bit differently. So I'll be sending that out today, and that'll kind of conclude that part of the audit. And then once the audit is published next week, that sort of makes it official that this audit is completed. And as I mentioned, it becomes a public record for anyone that wants to look at the audit report. They wouldn't be able to see like the management letters, the exit conference document, that sort of thing. But if they did a public records request, they could see it that way. But it's not something that, they're not going to typically see that. They'll see in that report that we referenced that there were management letters, but not the actual management letters themselves. That's just something we're providing to management for your consideration.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
All right. Well, everyone have a good weekend, and we will hopefully, by the time we see you again, maybe we will be fully in person and not have to do this kind of remote audit. And things seem to be getting better, at least in this area. So I'm hoping that we continue onward and upward, and we're done with the pandemic, and we can be back to normal. But unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know exactly how things will go, but we're hoping that'll be the case. So we will talk to y'all soon, and we'll see you for the next audit.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice